Hello, this is Mr. Radish, and what we're doing today is we're going to be talking about lab equipment that we're going to be using in the laboratory. These are a list of all the things that we're going to be using. There is some that are missing, but this is what you will be taking the quiz over. So what we want to do is we want to start in the top right corner and talk about the supplies that we will be using. First that you will see is 3 beakers. These 3 beakers, the beaker, the Erlenmeyer flask, and test tubes, all are used to hold solutions, and that we use these two specifically to mix things and to also cause reactions inside. Test tubes, on the other hand, are smaller. The test tubes that we use usually are used inside of very small chemical reactions, and then we also use these for to heat and cool things. Next up is the ring stand. The ring stand is used to hold things for us so we don't have to stand there and watch, and we can use them to stir. And whenever we do this, we have this nice little thing here. It's called a iron ring. The iron ring is used to hold a beaker whenever it's over a Bunsen burner, or we also have heating pads, which we will be using most of the time is heating pads because we don't have gas in our room. This nice little tool right here is a utility clamp. We can have all kinds of things on the end of it, but mostly what it's going to happen with this is that the end of it will be holding test tubes, because that is what we're going to be using the most of our reactions with. Next up is safety goggles. Safety goggles are used to protect your eyes. They're not used to protect your forehead or your throat. We will talk more about safety goggles later. A wire gauze we use to put on the ring stand to hold beakers more stable. Tongs are used to hold beakers when they're hot or excessively cold so that you don't have to put your hands on them to keep you from being burned. Test tube holder, again, is just like tongs, only it's for test tubes specifically. Next up are droppers and micro pipettes. These are to count drops whenever we're using to mix solutions. Test tube rack to hold our test tubes whenever we're looking at reactions. Wire brushes for janitor use purposes. We won't use forceps and files too much. Or a lab burner. Next, we want to look at a thermometer. A thermometer comes in whenever we start looking at exo and endothermic reactions. And then we have, last but not least, a graduated cylinder. Graduated cylinder, we're going to go in depth in just a little bit, but we use this to measure smaller amounts of liquids. Okay, at the end of this, I will leave this large so that you can use to study whenever we start talking about our lab quiz. Next up, goggles. Whenever we use goggles, goggles are used to protect your eyes. So whenever we look at goggles, they should be worn here. And whenever we talk about wearing them here, they're called goggles because you have these wonderful, beautiful googlers here. What we can do to look at people. It is not used, on the other hand, to be on your forehead. They're not foggles. So wearing them here, even though you hate them on your eyes, you don't want them to be protecting your eyeballs up there because, well, let's face it, we don't have eyeballs up there. So they're not foggles. And then they're not thogles either, so whenever we talk about thogles, don't wear them down here because, let's face it, your eyeballs aren't down here either, and they're not beautifying your throat, so we don't want to wear thogles and foggles. So what we want to do is to be sure that we don't use them like this. Alright, now we're done with those. Let's talk about the graduated cylinder. A couple of things that we need to know about graduated cylinders is that they're measured in milliliters because we're in science. We'll talk about the metric system in another portion. But one of the things that we want to be sure that we know is that when the liquid's up, and I ask you how much is in there, there is a line that goes right across there, right at the bottom of the meniscus. At the bottom of the meniscus, this one is going to show 30 milliliters. What you do is you read it at the bottom. And this is called a meniscus. The meniscus is caused by surface tension of water, which will cause it to go up the side. The water will go up the side and make this nice little U shape. So whenever you measure this stuff, you want to always remember that the meniscus, you read it at the bottom. Graduated cylinders. Next up is Bunsen burner. Whenever we talk about Bunsen burners are an interesting thing. Of course, we have a combustible gas that's going through it, and it's going to be burning. So one of the things that you have to be careful of is don't put your hands in the fire. And there's parts of the fire that's hotter than the rest, and you'll notice that there's unburnt gas. Whenever we look at unburnt gas, which is right there, it's that blue cone in the middle. But right here at the top, it's right here at the top that is the hottest. You have to be careful when you're putting things in the fire that is always the case. The closer to the tip of that cone is, the warmer it will be for us. So we want to always be sure that we're cognizant of those things. Next up is you need to know the parts. Of course, there's the base, and you can see all of these things. The chimney, the air hole. We'll discuss this more in chemistry, but the one thing that I want to show you is the different types of flame. So whenever we talk about the different types of flame, we have hot, a little warmer, warmer, and warmest still. Whenever this is the warmest, we have to always consider this. Whenever we see the blue flame and it's kind of translucent in the back end, that's as warm as it gets. Sometimes you see little flames of yellow going through, but generally that's the way it goes. The hotter, the more clear, the more blue. Alright, so there it is. Lab safety equipment. What I need you to do is we need to remember that the lab safety equipment, I'm going to try and turn this way so you can see the most of it, and we're going to move these things to the back, send backwards, okay, and send backwards. Alright, so this is going to be stubborn. So what we're going to do is we're going to leave it like this. Know that beakers is underneath and test tubes. And then all of our lab's equipment is there. Be sure that you study these for a quiz later. Thank you very much.